The Florida Everglades, a sprawling wetland covering more than 1.5 million acres, is often pictured as a serene, untouched natural landscape. Tall grasses sway in the wind, shallow waters glint in the sunlight, and scattered islands of trees seem to stretch endlessly across the horizon. To the casual observer, it appears a haven for wildlife, a unique ecosystem home to countless species of birds, mammals, and reptiles. However, beneath this tranquil appearance, the Everglades hide a secret danger that has transformed the region into a battlefield between humans and one of the most aggressive invasive species in the world, the Burmese python. These giant snakes, some reaching lengths of 18 feet or more, were originally brought to the United States as exotic pets in the 1980s and 1990s. Sold in pet stores and malls for prices as low as $30, these reptiles seem harmless as tiny hatchlings. Most buyers had no idea that these creatures, when grown, would become enormous predators capable of killing large animals by constriction. Over time, many owners released the snakes into canals and swamps once they became impossible to handle, creating a silent but growing ecological problem. The situation worsened dramatically after Hurricane Andrew struck South Florida in 1992, destroying reptile breeding facilities and releasing thousands of adult pythons into the wild. With no natural predators in the Everglades and an abundance of prey, these snakes began breeding rapidly. Scientists would later refer to this event as the biological Chernobyl of Florida because it permanently disrupted the region's delicate ecosystem. Within just 2 decades, the Everglades shifted from a balanced wetland to a territory dominated by top predators that consume almost any small or mid-sized animal. Populations of raccoons, possums, and marsh rabbits declined by over 90% in some areas, while even larger animals, such as deer and foxes, were found inside the stomachs of captured snakes. This unrelenting predation left the wetlands eerily silent, with hunters and biologists noting the absence of birds, small mammals, and other signs of life. Every part of the Everglades, from local agriculture to waterways, began to suffer as the python population exploded. Farmers lost livestock, mosquitoes multiplied unchecked, and floods carried piles of carcasses and animal waste into nearby farms, worsening environmental damage. Communities observed the invasion with horror, while some saw it as a moral lesson, a punishment for human arrogance disrupting natural balance. Despite the growing crisis, the initial response from authorities involved bounties, hunting contests, and other human-centered solutions that largely failed to reduce the snake population. The Everglades had become a python kingdom, a place where humans were struggling to reclaim control from nature's silent invaders by the early 2010s. Florida officials realized that the growing population of Burmese pythons could not be stopped through casual hunting or simple traps. The state organized contests and bounty programs, offering cash prizes to anyone who captured the largest number or the longest snakes. These events, intended as both population control and public engagement, quickly turned into spectacles reminiscent of war games. Thousands of participants armed with machetes, rifles, and headlamps flocked to the Everglades for a chance to earn money and fame. For a brief moment, it appeared as if humans might regain some measure of control. However, despite the massive effort, the results were disheartening. In one of the early challenges, more than 1,600 participants combined managed to capture only 68 snakes, a number negligible compared to the tens of thousands remaining in the swamps. Over the following years, Florida invested millions of dollars, employing professional hunters and paying bounties, but surveys showed that the python population continued to grow, increasing by about 30% in certain regions. The Everglades, with its vast stretches of dense vegetation, shallow water, and hidden canals, allowed the snakes to remain nearly invisible. For every python captured, dozens more escaped to reproduce. The aggressive hunts themselves caused collateral damage, with airboats destroying fragile marshlands, trucks leaving deep ruts, and carcasses burned in open pits releasing toxic mercury from the snake's consumption of contaminated prey. Local communities witnessed a mix of fear and entertainment, with python derbies turning into festivals complete with food stands, beer tents, and media coverage. While some residents celebrated hunters as folk heroes, others criticized the events for trivializing a serious ecological crisis. Even churches held prayer circles asking for divine intervention. The psychological toll on hunters and wildlife officers was severe. Many developed post-traumatic stress-like symptoms from handling mutilated animals, wading through black water at night, and witnessing constant carnage. Night vision footage recorded hunters nearly swallowed by snakes, highlighting the extreme danger they faced. Despite these heroic and exhausting efforts, humans were clearly losing the battle. It became evident that traditional methods were not enough, and new strategies relying on sharper instincts and specialized detection were necessary. This realization led to the introduction of scent detection dogs, trained specifically to locate live pythons, marking a significant evolution in the state's efforts to control the invasive predator in a desperate bid to curb the python crisis. Florida's wildlife agencies began training dogs to locate the invasive snakes in their natural habitat. Two highly skilled canines, a black Labrador named Truman and a Dutch Shepherd named Ellelaner, became the pioneers of this innovative approach. Both dogs underwent months of training to recognize the unique scent of live Burmese pythons, even when hidden beneath thick vegetation, water, or soil. The handlers rewarded the dogs with toys and treats each time they successfully identified a hidden snake, reinforcing their natural tracking instincts. Early results were promising. Within the first month, the dogs discovered several snakes that had gone undetected by hunters, including breeding pairs with dozens of eggs. These victories generated national headlines, with media outlets dubbing Truman and Ellelaner Florida's furious soldiers. However, working in the Everglades was extremely hazardous. The dogs and their handlers faced extreme heat, chemical runoff in irrigation canals, sharp vegetation, and risk of bites from the snakes themselves. Many dogs developed skin lesions and other health issues due to prolonged exposure to swamp water, while handlers suffered exhaustion, dehydration, and even infection from snake bites. Tragically, one canine was lost during a night patrol, her GPS collar being the only trace recovered. Despite these risks, canine detection proved that pythons could be located efficiently, giving humans a tool that traditional hunting had failed to provide. Yet, even this innovative method was not a perfect solution. The vastness of the Everglades meant that for every python found, dozens more remained hidden, reproducing freely and further destabilizing the ecosystem. As funding and resources dwindled, authorities knew they needed a more scalable solution, one that combined the lessons learned from dogs, humans, and traditional traps without causing further ecological or ethical harm. By the early 2010s, scientists and wildlife officials had exhausted almost every method to control the explosive Burmese python population in Florida's Everglades. Traditional hunting, bounties, and even canine detection, while somewhat effective, were not enough to keep the invasive species in check. Faced with mounting ecological destruction, some researchers proposed an extreme idea, using live marsh rabbits as bait to lure pythons into monitored zones. On paper, the logic seemed simple. Pythons already preyed on small mammals in the wild, so if live rabbits were placed strategically within enclosures, the snakes could be captured more efficiently. The first trials began in restricted areas of the Everglades. Scientists constructed small pens along trails and canals, equipped with motion cameras and radio sensors to track activity throughout the night. Initially, nothing happened. Then, over a few weeks, pythons began approaching, and the researchers captured a limited number of snakes. However, the success came at a significant cost. Most of the rabbits were killed by the predators, and footage in the trials revealed disturbing scenes. Snakes striking with incredible speed, crushing the cages, and swallowing the animals alive. The researchers monitored these events through radio feeds, recording the distress calls of the rabbits as the predators attacked. The psychological toll on the scientists was severe. Many reported nightmares and guilt so intense that it resembled combat-related trauma. Some employees developed compassion fatigue, a condition arising from prolonged exposure to suffering, and several left conservation work entirely. When news of the trials leaked to the public, the backlash was immediate and fierce. Animal rights organizations condemned the program, describing it as sacrificing one species to save another. Editorials and local opinion pieces referred to the experiments as a moral failure, and the phrase "blood for biodiversity" began circulating in online forums. Additionally, the experiments had unintended ecological consequences. Rabbit carcasses left behind contaminated water sources and attracted scavengers such as vultures and feral hogs, creating further problems for the wetland ecosystem. Farmers complained that the enclosures had turned parts of the Everglades into feeding grounds, bringing predators dangerously close to livestock. Religious leaders and community elders voiced outrage, likening the live bait program to ancient animal sacrifices. Public hearings and investigations followed, and within a year, the state officially shut down the program. Despite the moral failure and public condemnation, one undeniable scientific truth emerged from these trials. The presence of rabbits, whether real or simulated, was highly effective in attracting Burmese pythons. This observation became the foundation for a new, less ethically fraught approach. If live animals could lure snakes from hiding, perhaps mechanical or robotic decoys could achieve the same goal without causing suffering. The ethical disaster using live rabbits, though controversial and emotionally draining, inadvertently paved the way for technological innovation that would revolutionize python control efforts. After the public outrage over live rabbit trials, a small team of engineers and biologists began exploring a more humane solution, creating robotic rabbits that could mimic the presence of live prey. The goal was ambitious. These robots needed to survive harsh Everglades conditions, attract pythons using multiple sensory cues, and relay real-time data to field teams, all without harming the environment. The development process began with careful observation of marsh rabbit behavior. Scientists filmed hundreds of hours of footage, analyzing movement patterns, heart rates, body temperature, and typical reactions to threats. They learned that pythons primarily hunt using heat detection rather than sight. This meant the robots would need to radiate warmth at the exact temperature of a living rabbit. Engineers installed miniature thermal heaters inside the chest cavities of each robot, regulated by microprocessors to maintain a steady 37 degrees Celsius, simulating a living animal. In addition to heat, scent was essential. Each robotic rabbit released a synthetic chemical that mimicked rabbit pheromones, a key cue for pythons hunting in thick grass or muddy water. Movement was equally important for realism. The robots featured lightweight titanium skeletons and micromotors that allowed their ears and paws to twitch irregularly, preventing repetitive, robotic patterns that could alert the snakes. Infrared cameras mounted in the eyes of the rabbits could identify the scale patterns of a python from several meters away and transmit alerts to central field teams through a wireless network. Powering these robots posed another challenge. The Everglades' wet, hot, and muddy environment made conventional batteries unreliable. Engineers solved this by incorporating miniature solar panels to recharge lithium-ion batteries, all enclosed within waterproof synthetic fur. The fur, made from silicon-based polymer, resisted rot, fungus, and chemical damage, ensuring the robots could withstand prolonged exposure to the swamp. Safety and environmental concerns were also addressed. The robots were programmed to shut down automatically if damaged, preventing any leakage of batteries or lubricants into the ecosystem. Once the prototypes were ready, field tests began in areas known for heavy python activity. Within days, the robots proved effective. Pythons approached the decoys as they would reel prey, and when a snake struck, field teams received real-time alerts to safely capture predator. This breakthrough marked a turning point in Florida's battle against invasive species. Unlike live rabbit trials, robotic rabbits allowed researchers to gather crucial behavioral data without causing ethical dilemmas or public outrage. Each robot, affectionately dubbed a mechanical martyr by the engineering team, provided insights into python hunting patterns, helping refine future models and improving capture success rates. While some local residents were initially unsettled by the machines, citing superstitions or fears of disturbance to the land, the results spoke for themselves. Robotic rabbits were attracting pythons more efficiently than any human or canine effort had managed before. For the first time, science had created a tool that combined ethics, technology, and effectiveness, offering a potential solution to one of the most challenging ecological problems in modern American history. The introduction of robotic rabbits into the Florida Everglades was hailed as a technological triumph. Yet within months, researchers began observing unexpected consequences that no one had predicted. At first, the devices performed exactly as intended, luring pythons out of hidden areas and allowing scientists and wildlife officers to capture snakes more efficiently. Cameras captured footage of pythons slithering toward the heat-emitting, pheromone-scented decoys, striking with the same predatory precision they would have employed on a live rabbit. However, field teams soon noticed a subtle but troubling pattern. Some snakes began circling the robotic rabbits instead of striking immediately, displaying cautious behavior that had not been observed in earlier hunts. Others posed, seemingly testing the devices before retreating into grass. Data logs revealed anomalies. In one instance, a robotic rabbit swallowed by a python continued transmitting signals for over 18 hours, producing a rhythmic pulse similar to a living heartbeat. Engineers and biologists argued for weeks over the source of the signal. Some hypothesized that the sensors were detecting muscular contractions of the python's digestive system. Others suggested the possibility of a previously unknown physiological response triggered by the artificial prey. Beyond data anomalies, pythons began demonstrating more organized hunting patterns. Previously solitary predators were observed clustering in certain regions, coordinating ambushes in ways that suggested an evolving strategy. Drone surveys confirmed that snakes were spreading into areas previously thought unsuitable for their survival, including irrigation tunnels, drainage systems, and farmlands well beyond the Everglades' traditional boundaries. Farmers began reporting missing livestock once again, as calves and chickens disappeared without a trace. Laboratory analyses of fecal samples revealed another alarming development. Traces of microplastic fibers, likely originating from the decoys, were entering the food chain. Birds feeding on fish in contaminated water began accumulating these fibers, highlighting a subtle but concerning environmental impact of the robotic program. Even with these complications, robotic rabbits remain the most effective tool for detecting and capturing pythons. The devices allowed researchers to monitor snake behavior in real time and refine their capture techniques. But the evolving behavior of the pythons posed a new challenge. These predators were adapting faster than scientists had anticipated. The robots, initially intended as neutral tools for ecological management, were unintentionally influencing the behavior of one of the most formidable invasive species in North America. Each deployment of a decoy required careful monitoring, as researchers weighed the benefits of capturing large snakes against the risk of accelerating adaptive strategies that could make future hunts less effective. In essence, the very tool designed to restore balance to the Everglades was also demonstrating the intelligence and adaptability of the ecosystem's most dangerous invader. It became clear that human intervention, even when guided by technology and ethics, could never fully predict or control the complex dynamics of nature. This realization marked a critical turning point. Scientists were no longer just fighting snakes. They were learning to coexist with an invasive species that was reshaping the landscape in unpredictable ways. The Everglades, already scarred by decades of human interference and biological accidents, had entered a new era, one in which robotic innovation and ecological adaptation intersected in ways that challenged assumptions about control, ethics, and the limits of technology. While robotic rabbits solved many practical problems, they also raised profound ethical questions. Unlike live rabbit trials, these devices did not involve actual animal suffering, yet they prompted communities and researchers to confront the consequences of creating synthetic predators. Local residents began reporting eerie phenomena: glowing red eyes on recharging robots at night, strange patterns of movement that seemed almost sentient, and superstitions about the spirits of animals that had died in previous live bait trials inhabiting the machines. Indigenous elders refused to enter areas where the robots were deployed, claiming that the land had been disturbed by machines pretending to be alive. These reactions, though not grounded in science, highlighted the cultural and psychological dimensions of wildlife management that technology could not easily address. From an ecological perspective, the robots presented another set of challenges. While they eliminated direct harm to live bait, mechanical failures occasionally resulted in the release of tiny synthetic components into wetlands, raising concerns about microcontamination. Additionally, by attracting and concentrating large pythons in specific areas, the decoys inadvertently created localized pressure on other wildlife, as captured snakes were removed from their territories and replaced by new ones moving into the vacated space. The phenomenon of adaptive predation, where pythons modified their hunting strategies in response to the robots, also underscored a broader lesson. Ecosystems are highly dynamic, and interventions, no matter how well-intentioned, can have cascading effects. Researchers were forced to rethink the very concept of control. Human ingenuity could create tools that outsmart predators, but those tools also had the potential to change predator behavior, influence prey populations, and alter the broader food web in unforeseen ways. In many ways, the robotic rabbits symbolized both the promise and peril of modern conservation. They represented a breakthrough in humane, technological wildlife management, yet they also illustrated the complex ethical terrain of intervening in a system where humans had already disrupted the natural order. Balancing the efficiency of the robots with the unpredictability of both animal behavior and ecological consequences became the guiding challenge for Florida's wildlife agencies. At the same time, the public remained deeply engaged. Media outlets chronicled the robotic rabbits as both a marvel of engineering and a moral experiment, sparking debates on animal welfare, environmental responsibility, and the limits of human control over nature. The Everglades, already a site of ecological drama and historical significance, had now become a laboratory for exploring the intersection of ethics, technology, and invasive species management. Researchers were no longer merely trying to capture pythons. They were attempting to navigate the moral and practical implications of shaping an ecosystem with artificial life forms, a responsibility that demanded careful observation, transparency, and constant adaptation. Over the years, robotic rabbits proved to be one of the most innovative tools in the fight against the Burmese python invasion, yet their effectiveness highlighted a striking reality. Controlling an invasive species is not just about technology, it is about adaptation. Field reports from the Everglades showed that while initial deployments of robotic rabbits significantly increased capture rates of large pythons, the snakes began exhibiting unexpected behaviors over time. Pythons, once lured immediately to a decoy, started approaching cautiously, circling, or even ignoring the devices altogether. Biologists observed small clusters of snakes seemingly communicating indirectly through the environment, establishing ambush points near water channels and breeding zones. This behavioral adaptation suggested that the robotic rabbits were not simply capturing predators. They were teaching them. The invasive pythons were learning to recognize patterns in their surroundings, a phenomenon previously undocumented in the species at this scale. From an ecological perspective, these findings raise critical questions. Each successful capture removed a predator from a particular area, but also created a void in the local food web. New pythons moved in, sometimes exhibiting more cautious or coordinated behavior learned from environmental cues, which made subsequent hunts progressively more challenging. The robotics team continuously upgraded the decoys to mimic subtle behavioral patterns of real rabbits more accurately, adjusting movement, heat output, and pheromone release. These incremental improvements maintained a level of effectiveness, yet scientists acknowledged that there was no permanent solution. The Everglades were vast, over 1.5 million acres of marsh, grass, and water, and no single strategy could comprehensively control the python population. Importantly, the long-term use of robotic rabbits yielded valuable data that extended beyond immediate capture metrics. Researchers learned more about python breeding behaviors, hunting strategies, habitat expansion, and interactions with native species. For example, cameras on robotic rabbits documented pythons preying in previously unrecorded areas, such as irrigation canals, farmlands, and drainage tunnels. The information gathered allowed state wildlife officials to anticipate problem areas and allocate resources more efficiently. Furthermore, the technology facilitated safer study conditions for biologists, who could monitor snakes remotely rather than entering dangerous terrain directly. The robots reduced human and canine exposure to physical hazards, including sharp reeds, contaminated water, and aggressive pythons, highlighting a key advantage over traditional hunting methods. Despite these successes, robotic rabbits also underscore the limitations of human intervention in natural systems. No matter how advanced the technology, invasive species are inherently resilient. Burmese pythons possess remarkable reproductive capacity, adaptability, and stealth, enabling them to respond to environmental pressures with strategies that humans cannot always predict. Consequently, wildlife managers began emphasizing the need for multifaceted approaches, combining robotic decoys with public education, control hunting, habitat monitoring, and research into potential natural predators. The broader implication was clear. Technology alone cannot restore ecological balance. It is a tool, albeit a powerful one, but it must be integrated into a system of continuous learning and adaptation. Robotic rabbits demonstrate the potential of bio-inspired engineering and conservation, yet they also reveal the profound complexity of ecosystems disrupted by invasive species. They became both a symbol of human ingenuity and a reminder that nature cannot be fully controlled. Only guided with care, insight, and respect for its unpredictable dynamics, the Robotic Rabbit Project in Florida offers a unique case study at the intersection of technology, ethics, and conservation. From the early, morally troubling live rabbit experiments to the development of advanced mechanical decoys, the effort illustrates the delicate balance between innovation and responsibility. One of the most important lessons is that effective conservation requires humility. Scientists and engineers can develop ingenious tools to solve immediate problems, but they must also consider long-term ecological impacts, behavioral adaptations, and ethical considerations. In Florida, the robotic rabbits provided immediate benefits by reducing the number of